there's one camp of people that just say, I can't give up meat. It's just part of their ideology. There's some people that are actually more willing to experiment and go vegan and don't experience the boost in health that maybe a lot of people will. So what do you say for people? Are there exceptions where because of their, bio makeup that they're going to lean more towards positive responses to animal products? And what do you say to those individuals that have tried plant-based diet and they feel like it just didn't work for them? And of course, there's so much anecdotal, perspectives there, and you have to know what they're actually eating. But for people that actually give it a good try and eat holistic plant foods, and they feel like it just doesn't work for them, what do you say?
I think there might be some subtle genetic differences that, results in certain people doing better on different diets. I don't think that genetic differences are large enough such that one person thrives on the carnivore diet and that's the best diet for their long-term health and the next person vegan. I think it comes back more to that theme and then variation within that theme based on the individual. And we know that there are some genetic differences. For example, some people have a poorer ability to convert beta carotene, which is a plant compound, into vitamin A. And maybe those people, it's a very small subset of the population, but maybe those people need a direct source of vitamin A, for example. So I do think that there definitely is genetic differences that exist. I'm not sure people like talking about that, but it certainly exists. So it's not all in everyone's head. But I do also think that there are some reasons why someone may fail on a plant-exclusive diet with regards to how they adopt it. And one of the biggest ones is not consuming enough energy, particularly for males.
Not enough energy.
Yeah.
Overall caloric.
Yeah, not enough calories.
Yeah.
It's less calorie dense. The volume of the food's much higher. Yeah. So when you're sitting down and looking at your plate, it should look like there's a lot more food on the plate. And I had some difficulty early on with that myself. I found that I was losing some weight and I didn't feel like my energy was amazing. And that was able to be easily corrected by just understanding I wasn't eating enough calories.
Yeah.
So, bringing in some more calorie dense foods into my diet, like nuts and seeds and avocados and, throwing in dates and whatnot into smoothies was able to really help me with that. And I felt much better. My energy levels went up a lot. So that's a common sort of pitfall that I find. We've already spoken about fiber. I think that speaking with many people and working with many people that try and make these transitions, I totally recommend going slow and build it out over time. Put less pressure on yourself. Also allow the microbiome in the body to adapt, and I think you'll get a better result long term. So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but they're kind of the main things I would focus on.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You got to eat. Your plate will be bigger. You'll be eating more. And I suppose, if people aren't training and they switch to a vegan diet and they feel like they're losing muscle, it's probably just because they're eating less protein overall, depending on what they're eating on the new diet. But if you're working out, like when I went plant-based like 7 years ago, I didn't see any dip in my, cause I kept working out. I didn't see any dip in how much muscle I was holding. And I felt like I actually built muscle over time as I continue to train. And there's a lot of incredible athletes that are doing amazing things in the world and different sports that are plant-based and have been for a while. So
yeah, you don't have to really sacrifice anything when it comes to your performance or how you feel. A lot of what we've spoken about is about long-term health today. But I do want to make it clear that it's not about sacrificing today. You can feel amazing. You can still pursue your athletic endeavors. It requires some new learnings. How much calories do I need? What food groups do I want to make sure I'm including in my diet? How much fat and carbohydrates leave me feeling best? That's going to be something for people to play around with. I'm not a big subscriber to there is one macronutrient ratio that is best for everyone. It's similar. Like some people seem to feel better on a higher carb diet, some on a lower carb. I think the most important thing there is the quality of the macronutrients. So the fat that you're consuming, try and have more of it as unsaturated fat. Carbohydrates, it's more of the unrefined, less processed carbohydrates. That's what really matters at the end of the day, not a strict kind of macronutrient ratio being best for everyone. What supplements do you need to fill any potential gaps? And at the beginning, that's a bit of information to take in, but you've been doing this for 7 years now. Once you get moving and everything becomes second nature, it's not really something that you give a lot of thought to, which in many ways is why I still work with people who are going through the transition, because if I wasn't, I would forget what that process was like, because I'm not thinking about this stuff, every day to the nth degree in my own lifestyle. It's kind of on autopilot now.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's just going to, of course, feel a little clunky right off the bat when you're making any change in your life, especially if there's a lot of people reinforcing your old lifestyle to you that are around you. If you live with a lot of family members who eat a lot of meat, and it can be a big switch up. But once you get going and build that momentum, it just becomes a part of who you are, and it's like you don't question, or there's not this inner struggle to like, oh, I really want that meat or something. It's just like it's off the table. It's not an option. So I think that's an important perspective as well. And what are some other potential blind spots that people might face when they start to go exploring this? Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you might want to bring up?
I often talk about nutrients of focus. We've spoken about a few of those. We spoke about B12. We spoke about DHA, EPA, omega-3s. I touched on iodine. Vitamin D is something that I would suggest everyone sort of considers. 80% of your vitamin D status is dictated by exposure to the sun, not diet. Diet can contribute a little bit. But depending on where someone lives, are we talking about a northern sort of latitude? What's their skin pigmentation? Because that will affect how much vitamin D that they'll make for a given amount of sun exposure. I would do a vitamin D sort of lab test, and it might be something, a lot of people are low in vitamin D. So you can supplement with vitamin D. If you want to get a vegan option, you can look for a vitamin D3 from plant lichen, which is now quite available. Otherwise, D3 usually comes from wool, or a vitamin D2, which is sourced from mushroom. So both of those are kind of options there. Calcium is something that people often ask about, and I do think this is important for us to discuss a little bit here. All diets have pros and cons, limitations, and I'm one for, I want to put recommendations out there, but I want to shine lights on the limitations. I don't want to cover them up. Like, let's make them clear so people can see the limitation, then they can plan accordingly and get best results. And one of the potential kind of blind spots or limitations of a plant-exclusive diet that doesn't have dairy foods in it, and this is particularly relevant for postmenopausal women, is insufficient calcium intake and an increase in risk of osteoporosis and bone fractures. And there are some studies showing that. So I like to make sure that everyone is aware of where they're getting their calcium from. You're going to get, a bunch of that from cruciferous vegetables and certain types of legumes like white beans, for example, pinto beans. You'll get some from sesame seeds, and a bunch of whole foods contain calcium. But I think if you're taking dairy foods out of your diet, I like people to, with their plant-based milks, to opt for something that's firstly is unsweetened, ideally, doesn't have all the added sugars in it, but is fortified with calcium. I think you should look for something that has about 200 to 300 milligrams of calcium per serve in a plant-based milk or a plant-based yogurt as well. And that will help people get to north of 700-800 milligrams of calcium a day, which is the lower end of where you want to land. You don't want to be consuming a plant-exclusive diet with 500 milligrams of calcium a day, particularly if you're a postmenopausal woman. So calcium, and just to round that out, very important for bone mineral density is resistance training. So we come back to that, and other nutrients like vitamin D and vitamin B12 and protein. So those are the big ones. Iron and zinc. Often people ask me about phytates, which is another kind of quote unquote anti-nutrient. Phytates is the kind of primary storage form of phosphorus in plants, and it can bind up minerals like iron and zinc and reduce their availability. Now, I think this is overblown. I think people like Paul Saladino, who I've spoken to about this, cite studies like a single meal, a single food, looking at that high phytate food or meal and what happens to the absorption of minerals. And that's problematic for a few reasons. One is that the effect of phytates is greatly modulated by all of the foods in a whole meal. So when you add foods, for example, that contain vitamin C in them, like lemon juice over a meal, or bell peppers, a lot of different fruits and vegetables are rich in vitamin C, that greatly increases the absorption of these minerals and reduces attenuates the effect of phytates, as do fermented foods. Fermented foods will unlock mineral availability in your meals. So that's one reason why these single food studies, I think, are a little bit problematic or misleading. The second is your body is incredibly adaptive. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I feed you for the first time a high phytate meal, maybe it will have quite a significant effect on your absorption of iron and zinc. But if I feed you that for 2 weeks straight, what happens? Your body adapts and it increases your iron and zinc absorption over time. So it's really important when we're looking at the studies to create a case for whether phytates, phytic acid, are deleterious or not. We're considering that temporal, adaptive sort of component. And when you do consider that, you see that the effect is very, very small. Again, phytates, when you're soaking and cooking food, most of them are broken down. And what's also lost on people is that actually the binding of minerals through phytates could be, some of it at least, could be very beneficial. Having excessive minerals in the body, particularly iron causes oxidative stress. And now there's a whole field of cancer research actually looking at using phytate supplements as a powerful antioxidant to sort of attenuate or reduce the effect that these pro-oxidant minerals that are floating around in excess can have. So there's a lot more, I guess, to the phytate story than simply saying this food contains phytates, therefore it's robbing you of minerals, therefore you shouldn't eat it. And then, when you zoom out even further and you look at the foods that contain phytates, we see very clearly they're associated with good long-term health.